Good morning, folks, and welcome to episode 12 of Fintech Insider Breakfast Show, a show from the folks from 11FS bringing you the breaking news from around fintech and banking landscape every morning at 8:30 GMT. The idea is that seeing as we're all cooped up together for the next couple of months, we thought we'd try and start your day just a little bit brighter than it is. So the show is going to be a bit of a mix of the 11FS family and a bunch of people from around the world who 11FS know pretty well as well. So this morning, I'm going to be joined by Sharon O'Dea. So Sharon, you're the co-founder over at Lithos Partners, but I've known you, in fact, we were just chatting offline, like family friends in common for like such a weird amount of time. So this is like there's a weird Venn diagram of people we know, I think. But before we get into it, Sharon, do you want to give everybody a bit of an overview of what you do and what Lithos Partners do as well?
Yeah, cool. So I'm co-founder of a boutique consultancy, there's not many of us, and we help companies with digital communication and collaboration strategy.
Awesome.
So I mostly work with large organizations in regulated industry, particular banks.
So, I mean, given the circumstances right now, then there must be probably not a queue because everybody has to be pretty far apart at this stage, don't they? But definitely sort of a hell of a lot of demand for the things that you're doing, right?
Well-spaced queue, yeah.
How is Corona sort of affecting you? I know, you used to live over in London, didn't you? But you're now over in a very sunny Amsterdam by the looks of things. So, how's Amsterdam sort of being impacted by everything that's going on?
It's gone pretty quiet in Amsterdam, so I live right in the middle of where the tourist zone is, and it's gone from sort of petering down. There's a real 28 days later vibe at the moment. You look around, streets are completely deserted, which is kind of strange. I mean, business-wise, it's gone through a quite rapid change. So most of my work is elsewhere in Europe, particularly over in Switzerland at the moment. So they started dialing down a little bit before us. So the travel went, and that kind of affects what you can do with clients, obviously. A lot of the face-to-face stuff we've had to reconfigure. Projects have sort of been paused a little bit. But then the flip side of that is how people communicate and collaborate internally and with partners and with suppliers is really in our wheelhouse. So there have been a lot of new stuff come through. So it's been a lot of rapid change, having to reconfigure all of our plans, which is fun, I guess.
Well, at least you've got a pretty decent airport right on your doorstep when everything does kick off again, right?
Yeah, I'm actually quite glad not to be spending quite so much time there. Get a bit of a break.
That's true. Loads and loads of people joining in this morning. So hey to a bunch of people. Hey to Charles. Hey to Christina. Hey Simon Evangelina. Good to see you this morning. Jane G. Dharmesh again every morning. Dharmesh, loving you, my friend. Alberta, Michelle. Loads of people kind of joining in this morning, which is good. So, Sharon, you're a bit of a kind of a gym fanatic, aren't you? I think you've been sort of using squats as a way of kind of de-stressing, usually after a long day at work. But how are you sort of staying sane in this sort of period of time then? Because unless you've got a gym kit in the back there that I'm unaware of, then I'm guessing you can't trundle out to the gym anymore, right?
No, I'm really missing the gym. So it doesn't show, I know, but I do powerlifting in my spare time, which I love because it's a great way.
Won some huge weights as well. I've been like super impressed seeing the climb of that. It's amazing.
Yeah, I can do about double my weight, which is quite a lot because I'm a bit chunky. But yeah, I'm missing that, and I'm having to rapidly sort of reconfigure. I also go to a spin studio around the corner. I miss that a lot. So you're currently seeing my kitchen, which also doubles as an office and at the moment also a gym. So I reconnected with my PT from London, and we've started doing that on Zoom. It's kind of working. I think like a lot of us, we're trying to work out how we muddle through in this new kind of world where we're doing everything on Zoom.
It's pretty enterprising from PT's perspective as well that they've started doing lessons and things remotely. You know, inherently you would suspect that would be something you would have to do face to face, right? But I guess it's like the rise of things like Peloton, right? Increasingly people would prefer to sweat in their own privacy of their own home rather than with other people, I guess, right?
Yeah, I've not joined Peloton Club yet. Partly it hasn't launched in the Netherlands, but I really like going out to the gym. So I work from home anyway. Going to the gym is the thing I do to leave the house. Otherwise, I spend my entire time in my jogging bottoms. It's no good for anyone.
I'm quite enjoying that, I'll be honest with you. So I
had jeans on today because I was joining you.
Did you? What?
Yeah.
Just in case there was a bit of this where I made you stand up and walk around or something, just in case.
Yeah.
Right?
Normally it's all athleisure wear at the moment.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think I sort of devolved to that in the office over the last 2 years, actually. Anyway, so it's been interesting to see. I mean, I guess with everything that you do with looking at future work and remote working. I mean, what would be the tips you'd sort of have for people in this stage? Because it kind of feels like actually the opportunity for big companies to finally I mean, it's not really about having an excuse. They have no option but to really adopt this right now. So, I mean, what would be the advice you'd give to some of these organizations who have been sort of saying, well, data privacy and trust and all these things, like now what would they do?
At the moment, they're really having to muddle through. So a lot of big organizations are not set up for this, and often for really good reasons. That the security stuff is kind of at the perimeter of the network, and that's where the challenges lie. So I think pragmatism is what we've got to do at the moment. Everyone's sort of muddling through at the moment, but I think we've got to be kind to ourselves and give ourselves some slack, metaphorically, not literally, although that would possibly help. Actually, that we've got to recognize that sometimes we are going to have to bend those rules, and things that were considered impossible 6 months ago are suddenly happening in terms of like rapid transition to cloud technologies that they had long resisted, which is where it gets quite interesting, I think. But the real challenge lies in not just having the tools, but using them correctly. So a lot of organizations have had this stuff for years and actually done quite a half-assed job in terms of rollout or building that culture of collaboration and working out loud that really hasn't been adopted widely. And that's quite interesting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost been a good reason. I mean, it's very similar to why in a lot of big organizations that they can defend anything, really. It's usually sort of fear of something, isn't it? Like actually, if we let everybody work from home, wouldn't they not need to come into the office anymore? Or if we let everybody work from home, isn't there, big data problems that could kind of crop up on this? But I mean, most of those things really are excuses, aren't they, in this day and age,
Yeah, and I think it might force quite a rapid change. I don't know if you remember the last great home working experiment. So when we had the Olympics in London back in 2012, in order to reduce congestion on the tube, employers were encouraged to get everyone to work from home for about 3 weeks. And that was a massive deal. But, big organizations brought in various kind of tools and processes. And then at the end of it, people came back to the office and they were like, oh, we sold your floor. You're sharing with from accounts now. Actually, so there's been a sort of pattern there that's been going on a while of moving to part-time home working. This is just a different shift, but it does require a kind of mindset shift as well, that being able to take some tasks home is not the same thing as being able to work remotely all the time. And we're still very much in that period where people are almost like a honeymoon period of forming their own new patterns and being quite enthusiastic. I think when we get to the hard stuff, like how do we deal with performance challenges or recruitment or onboarding, or whether those things that are a bit more long term, there's a lot of stuff that hasn't worked out yet.
Yeah, I mean, we've loads of people joining in, right? We've got people coming in from Switzerland. We've got people joining in from Cape Town. Hey, Joel, from Kenya. Hey, David, from Dubai. Hey, Ronit. Man, there is a lot of people on here this morning, which is good. We seem to have hit that South Africa time zone, which is good. If you guys have got any questions for Sharon, feel free to put them in the comments and I can kind of pop them up. Not squatting technique. We have had some very weird questions, I have to say. We've been asked for...
I'm not doing a demo.
No, okay, fine. It really puts Zoom to a challenge at that point. I mean, it is interesting on that side that so many big organizations have resisted working from home for such a long period of time, right? I've just had somebody have a laugh and say hi from Doncaster, so it's good to see everybody's keeping a sense of humor as well. So, but actually, I mean, I think so often, and I've sort of touched on this a couple of times this week, is that it's not really a technological thing. I've seen big organizations shipping out PC towers to get people kind of connected, or various different pieces of kit being procured really quickly. But it's often much more cultural than that. What do you think to that?
Some of it is a technology thing. I think there's been a tendency in the past to focus on that. So Sarah talked last week some point about an insurer that's had those sort of barriers. But once you remove that friction, that's when you start to get to those the next layer, which actually do people know how to manage at distance? How do you build that sort of trust? There's all sorts of culture and practice sort of elements that are still sometimes a lot harder, and they require relearning the way that you manage and the way that you communicate. So I know a lot of us are suddenly finding ourselves on 20 Zoom calls a day just because we need to recreate those connections that we had in the office. And I think we might start to see that ease off a bit more, where people find the right kind of cadence for communication that they don't necessarily have at the moment. I think there's nothing wrong with over communicating at this point, rather than have no idea what anyone's doing.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people that, I mean, online, it feels very reminiscent of the war, doesn't it? I don't want to, I know we're two Brits here and we're like, yeah, let's talk about the war, but it feels very much like people are pulling together. And actually, I mean, I can't imagine, can you imagine being able to do this without the internet? Like I mean, my mum's in a like high risk category, so I literally haven't seen her for like 3-4 weeks, and actually, occasionally we go and shove something through wipe it, Dettol it down, and then shove it through the dog flap, and then like run away like quickly. But being able to FaceTime her and stay connected is huge, because that just means it feels like sort of normal life. But I mean, is it times like this, do you think, that we really appreciate how well connected the world really is? Technology does such a great job for us, doesn't it?
I know there was a thing on the BBC News from Rory Ketton-Jones the other day about, imagine this happened in 2005.
Yeah.
Actually, that we've all really been able to adapt really quickly and take the tools that are out there and be able to reconfigure them. So even the NHS have been really pragmatic and said, you know what, some stuff is super confidential, but for everything else, just muddle through. If you've got to use WhatsApp, we use WhatsApp. And I think we're starting to see some of that. I'm not going to be using House Party with any of my clients anytime soon, but we are starting to really get to grips with and have quite a lot of fun with some of those tools as well. If you look at, playing around with Zoom backgrounds, but also how easy these things are to use now, even for people who'd resisted them for a really long time. So in fact, I bought my grandmother a Facebook portal. So she's 97, so she's not a natural, tech head. But yeah, she's managed to get to grips with it. She can sort of shout at my mum via the medium. It's quite nice. And we're all sort of finding our own new ways through this stuff.
Yeah. Do you think it's going to lead to sort of more innovation then? Do you think the sort of necessity at this point is going to lead to more people doing interesting things? Because it seems like, I mean, it sounds like a Jurassic Park quote, but it feels like people are kind of finding a way to make this work right now.
Yeah, I mean, on the necessity is the mother of invention, right? So people are if you've got to get something done, you'll find a way to do it. And that's always been the case. If your work tools are shitty, then you'll find a way around using whatever you've got on your phone. That's just fact. So there's an awful lot of shadow IT within organizations and in our personal lives that we're suddenly finding actually really useful when your VPN to a big bank doesn't work. So and I think the bigger challenge will be when all of this is over, there's not going to be as much money sloshing around. So actually there will be a lot of CFOs who will be rubbing their hands with glee at the thought of all of this crap that they can get rid of. So actually there's I think there's two drivers there that will drive quite long-term innovation, but there's also some bigger challenges there around, actually, if we're only going to work once a week, do we have to live in London? Or when we've got people at I mean, I already got ahead of that by realising last year I didn't need to live in London and left. But that
was more to do with Brexit than anything, Sharon, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah, well, it was kind of a bit of both. I realised that actually I kind of never went into the office, and if I did, it wasn't always in the UK. So I could be anywhere. So I chose Amsterdam.
Well, it's good. I mean, if I could choose to live anywhere, if I could get my wife to leave Norwich, the place that I would go would be Amsterdam, just because it's a beautiful place. Everybody's very friendly. Only problem is they're all really tall, and being 5'10", I think I just stand out a lot, So, but it's a beautiful place.
I'm 11.5, so I genuinely look like a child here. It's really odd. I tried to hire a bicycle and they told me they didn't have any in my size. So I go to the spin studio and there's, all the bikes are up here, and then I have to take everything down to the lowest setting.
Well, at least it's always one extreme, right? But some good questions kind of coming through. Do you think this will finally push sales and marketing to actually collaborate, because they're going to have to actually communicate? Or do you think this will kind of lead to do you think it will lead to a culture of everybody having face-to-face conversations about things? Or do you think email is going to run rife over the next kind of couple of months with people?
That's a really good question. I think it sort of depends on the organization, but people are having to rapidly reconfigure what they do and how they do it. So it's a good it's a good time to do that, isn't it? Because actually customer needs are changing really quickly as well. So as a result, we are, particularly in fintech, going to have to think about how can we serve customers who are possibly facing quite difficult times at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's a follow-up question to this. Hey, Dennis Govan over in Hong Kong. Thanks for tuning in this morning. We also have a question that says, as employees become more self-sufficient in working from home, are employers going to realize over the next few months that many middle managers are no longer needed? Harsh, but potentially true, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something that's been true. So you've been rolling out kind of enterprise social networks in organizations. Middle managers are always the most challenging because knowledge is power. And if you are no longer the person that your team go to find stuff out, what are you for? Actually, and the other thing that you start to find these kind of unexpected junior experts across the organization. When everyone can contribute to the conversation equally, these people start to come into their own. You know, if someone who's just relatively junior in an organization can solve your problem, then they start to become really useful. And a lot of those people whose jobs are largely, you know, involve filling in spreadsheets and doing performance plans and stuff, and basically just do HR and problem solving, start to become less useful when people can solve their own problems.
Yeah, it's going to be strange. That change will be reasonably significant, I guess, if that really happens. Another question here from Adrian Field. Do you think excessive meeting culture will die off as office people become actually much more productive? I mean, I can definitely see that. I feel like people are having meetings now for very specific reasons rather than just 20 minutes of natter. So it's I could see that happening. Sharon, what do you think?
Absolutely. And although often these things tend to drift back to where they were, I mean, I would love the idea that we have less bullshit meetings where you make the same non-decisions week after week just because you always meet at this time on a Tuesday. Actually, if we're going into physical spaces less, then maybe we'll start to use that face-to-face time more effectively. I think it's quite exciting. Years ago, right, like just around the time I was at university, I did a really short job with at DEFRA, so it's the UK's Environment Ministry, and it was just around the time they had the foot and mouth crisis. So they brought the army in to help them manage that because they had to like bury a lot of sheep or something. And actually, one of the first things they did was just ban all meetings over 20 minutes and no one could sit down. And actually, it really focuses the mind. So these sort of crises can really transform the way that that you get stuff done, and you can create some really new habits. So instead of just recreating, let's just try and recreate the experience of this 2-hour meeting that we always have. Let's come in, be prepared, make a decision, and go away again. I think that would be great for everyone if we, you know, have more of our lives back. We might start to appreciate work-life balance a bit more, and actually appreciate spending time with our colleagues rather than finding it, you know, tedious.
Do you know what? I genuinely miss people at work, like the people that, I mean, you spend so much time kind of in and around them, but actually the people who you work with, like I was spending more time with people at work than I was with my family, which is probably good to try and balance that out a little bit. But definitely when you spend so much time with people, you miss them really quickly. So a good question here from Deval Gore, who's at London Partners, the Mayor of London's office. So this is an interesting one. Do we think that the change in working patterns will impact the conference scene? Do we really need it? Does it really drive sales? Does it really drive benefit? So are we all realizing all those conferences we were going to and presenting at are actually completely pointless, and there's more important things to be doing?
That's quite an interesting one, isn't it? Will we only see it when you can see it on the bottom line in a year's time? Will people notice? And well, there'll be other reasons, I guess, for any drop in sales. But all the best stuff at conferences happens outside the room anyway. It's those side conversations or the people you meet in the bar afterwards. So is it just we'll just go to the pub instead?
Maybe. I mean, you've been to many after dark events we put on. That's why we balance out 50% drinking and 50% pretending to be serious type thing. Because exactly like you say, it's the networking that actually is the benefit to anybody, isn't it? And maybe there is better ways of doing that, you know. Although actually, I mean, there's something quite sad about sitting on a Zoom with another person on a Zoom and you both having a drink, right? But that might be the future, drinking on your own. You never know.
We've started to do that. Me and my friends that go to the pub, we've got a Zoom pub and we'll jump on there and just have a chat. Not quite as good, but it'll do.
It's interesting, the atmosphere, isn't it? You need like a shared Spotify playlist so you're both playing the same music and the background vibe. You know, it's interesting to see. I mean, what happens next then? I mean, hopefully at some point, Sharon, we're all allowed back out of our our houses and to go back into normal life. But do you think, to your point around working practices, do you think people will just snap back to the way that it was done before? Or do you think this actually, particularly, I guess, with big companies, do you think it will lead to them realizing that actually working from home and different ways of trusting people actually is okay?
I think they will do. There's going to be a lot of working things out and making decisions over the next couple of months that actually will stick for the long term. People will realize that sometimes this kind of asynchronous way of working or being connected in different ways is just as valuable, and sometimes more so. So last year I did a talk about 2 different conferences, called The Future of Work is Already Here, and how actually a lot of those trends around, the mainstream of AI in the workplace, or more flexible work patterns and being more geographically distributed, are a lived reality for a lot of people, and if they're not already, will be soon. So given how long this stuff takes in organizations, you better start planning for it now. That talk's clearly already very out of date. So actually, a lot of organizations are suddenly pulling these plans out of their drawer they might have been doing in 3 years' time and accelerating them, which is overdue in lots of cases, but we're due quite, I think, a significant change in the workforce anyway. So there's no going back on that now. It's just accelerated the trend by about 10 years. The World Economic Forum, actually, they used to do their future work forecasts over 10 years. And then a couple of years ago, they shifted them to 5 years because they said 10 years was too long to be useful. I think they might be shifting them down to a year now.
Well, they have an envelope with a "if in case of global pandemic, open this one for the answer," essentially, right? So, but I mean, your point around the big organizational strategies is interesting, because most of them have this isn't a remote working strategy, it's a disaster recovery strategy, isn't it? Most of it initially looks like, split people into patterns, one in this location, one in this location, and that sort of solved the problem for about 3 days, didn't it? But then the whole world had to work from home. So it's it is interesting. I do worry that I mean, people have quite short memories on these things, so I do worry that actually both for the people who are doing it, but also the organizations, that they'll quite quickly snap back into kind of old bad habits to a certain degree, because it's easy and it feels like a pattern. But I hope it is. I mean, the environmental benefits of people staying from home must be huge. The ability for the earth to heal a little bit on everybody not sort of pumping gas out there is probably a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and those of us who are traveling about a bit, are adding rather more than we should to the carbon footprint. So actually, there's a lot to be said for working this way, and actually realizing, do we need to spend time together? But then there's other stuff that we haven't quite worked out. Like, actually, the pattern of working from home, it used to be that you would work in the office when you're relatively junior, and you get a bit older and you move further out of London and they know you and they trust you. You start to work from home a day or two, and then that sort of builds up. Actually, what do we do for people who are kind of early in their careers? Because a lot of what you learn at work is just by overhearing someone who knows what they're talking about doing it and then copying them. Yeah. And we're not really in a position where we're able to do that, that sense of getting that ambient knowledge of what's going on. So actually, all of us are going to have to be much more deliberate about how we're working so that we can start to build that kind of next generational workforce.
Yeah, I mean, learning and development takes on a very different guise now, doesn't it? Because really, you're going to have to spend a lot more time embedding those things. I mean, at 11FS, we've had over this period, about 13 or 14 new people join the company, and onboarding people remotely is an interesting challenge. We're sort of sending out laptops to people, we're kind of getting people up to speed, and then I'm having like a very intense, "Hey, I'm the CEO, have you got any questions" thing. But there's no other way of not doing it, because it's like, usually it would be like an off comment kind of, hanging out, like nice and relaxed thing. Now it's a really intense meeting where it's like putting pressure on people to ask smart questions off the bat type thing. And it's really hard to know what to do on that. Janet Hitchens said, comment about ambient knowledge is bang on, Sharon. So well done on that one. And she knows a lot about it. If you haven't come across Janet, Sharon, I think you two would really, really hit it off. Internal communications at Apple for about 15 years. And I think you two would definitely strike up a strike up a friendship for sure. There's some loads of good questions. We're probably not going to be able to get to all of them, but one here from Dharmesh. So clearly banks will see acceleration of use in digital, but do you think customers will also see the value of being able to speak to people in branches? So, I mean, are we going to start seeing much more advancements in remote service offerings for customers as well? I know people like Nationwide have sort of dabbled with it, haven't they, over the years, but it's never really taken off because I guess people had an alternative, which was just walking into a branch, right?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting time, isn't it, in that inflection point between neobanks and old banks, in that on the one hand, the Monzos, the Revoluts are much more agile and able to reconfigure their operations much more quickly. But then banks have the trust element. And when the chips are down and people are having to get a mortgage holiday or an overdraft in a hurry, they turn to those known organizations, and in particular, organizations who can have someone on the phone who can be reassuring. And I think this will start to be a bit of a challenge. So those organizations who can offer a sympathetic voice, actually they could be standout, and that's when you start to build trust between brands and the public, I guess.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I hope everybody sees this as an opportunity, really. I mean, I don't know if there's an interesting thing that kicking around on social media right now of 3 options. Who kicked off your digital transformation? Was it your CEO? Was it your CDO? Or was it the coronavirus? And arguably the coronavirus might have done more for really setting up digital in most workplaces and for most customers than pretty much anything we've done over the last 20 years. So
yeah, I mean, it's been a real sort of generational thing as well. That kind of laggard end of the adoption curve are suddenly getting on board. People are getting their mums and their grands and set up with digital channels to do things that they would ordinarily have gone out to do, and they suddenly can't.
Yeah, the remote version of figuring out how you can set up somebody's iPad and get everybody working. I mean, there's probably a business in that, isn't there? Like hazmat suit and iPads in the back of a van, and you'd probably be like a millionaire very quickly, wouldn't you?
Yeah, right. I mean, whenever they have those kind of recovery certificates, those sort of people will be going around fixing everyone's IT for them.
Indeed. All right, guys. Well, that's probably all we have for just coming about to the top of the hour. So, Sharon, where can people find out a little bit more about you and what you guys are up to at Lithos Partners?
So you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Sharon ODea. Yeah.
And very, very entertaining, I have to say. Look, I've spoken to a few people over the last couple of weeks on this show that I always find are the people who always stand out for me on social. Actually, you and Gavin, who we had on last week. So you're in like you and a BBC News presenter, basically, Sharon. So that's pretty good.
Now. Me and Simon had a bet on it.
Sounds good. All right, guys, that's all we've got for you today. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you tomorrow morning. Thanks very much.
Yeah.